Hello everyone and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of a Proxi beat. This audio podcast is part of the Catharsis Scrutiny. This audio podcast is part of a Lobostics Interval. This audio podcast is part of a Storm Lobostics production. In this audio podcast, there will be an overview in around peer-reviewed works from works peer-reviewed and published in 2021. So collaborative works, and where the overview will be a sort of an excerpt in around this work. So the collaborative works in peer review works were published in a Journal of Biomedical Sciences, Journal of Biomedical Sciences 2021, in around the role of epidermal growth factor receptor and microbial infections in polycystic kidney disease. So in around the abstract or the excerpt, if you like. So autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, or ADPKD, is a frequently inherited inherited disease associated with the presence of fluid-filled cysts. Epidermal growth factor receptor, or EGFR, and that is EGFR, not to be confused with estimated glomerular filtration rate, or EGFR. So epidermal growth factor plays a role in cyst development. So in around sort of the design of this works, and around this peer-reviewed works. So the following databases or search engines were utilized as part of this works. So PubMed Central, Medline, a Medline search engine, and Locate and Google Scholar were utilized in where this peer review works was a literature focused. And so main terminologies are used to search for literature included polycystic kidney disease, epidermal growth factor receptor, tyrosine kinase inhibitor, renal cyst formation, and renal cyst infection. And studies and investigations beyond 10 years, beyond a decade, were not included in this works. So in around some parts of the analysis, so the cross examination of research papers allowed to analyze literature around the basis around the role of epidermal growth factor receptor in autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease and pathophysiology, and EGFR and tyrosine kinase as part of a treatment of ADPKD, and the role of microbial, and how and also the role of microbial cyst infections in disease progression. And so in around the results of this works. So there is some evidence within the literature that look at EGFR, tyrosine kinase inhibitor, TKI, and cyst infection in autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease over the past decade. And so the crosstalk between a sort of a biomarker SRC and the full peer review works sort of delves into the different abbreviations, but there is a biomarker that's referred to as SRC. The crosstalk between SRC and epidermal growth factor receptor and epidermal growth factor receptor was observed to have an impact on cyst development and progression. Therefore, the combined treatment with different compounds can be a desirable approach in the treatment of ADPKD, and there has been an observed relationship or interplay between cyst infections, decrease in kidney function or renal function, and polycystic kidney disease gene mutation. Endotoxins or gram-negative bacteria could be involved in disease development. So in around the sort of conclusions of this peer review works. So the understanding of mechanisms of ADPKD and several cancers at the same time has led to the identification of molecular targets, and one of these is or has been epidermal growth factor receptor. The further investigations could establish the role of endotoxin in ADPKD development and its interaction with EGFR. Some terminologies that can be utilized to identify sort of published works works as well include PKD, TKI or tyrosine kinase inhibitor, kidney care, epidermal growth factor receptor, microbiology, and science. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This has been an audio podcast as part of a Proxi beat. This audio podcast has been a part of a Catharsis Scrutiny. It's an audio podcast as part of the Bostics Interfold, an audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production.